Hi guys, it's me, Arden Lee, and today I want to talk a little bit about some of the larger context around the work that I do in the Repatterning Project. And I want to talk about this question of what is the greater purpose of happiness? What is beyond, you know, beyond like, okay, who doesn't want to be happy, right? But beyond happiness for happiness's sake, for ourselves, for the experience of happiness, for the joy and the pleasure of happiness, what what is the point, right? What is the larger point of it? Um, I've been sort of hinting in the last couple of videos that I was going to talk a little bit more about the greater sort of global context, and this is where I'm going to try and explain some of that. There's um, there's no surprise at this point that we're in a pretty widespread global crisis in terms of the survival of the planet, right? We can kind of agree on that. There is climate change, for one, right? We have been doing things that have been damaging the environment. We've been creating systems, setting up systems that we live by that are not sustainable, right? Um, so we're damaging the environment. We are depleting resources and accumulating waste, right? We are depleting things such as the rainforest, right? We are in a crisis in terms of how many trees we have, how much oxygen is being produced in the planet, right? The Amazon rainforest that were on fire, we're called the lungs of the earth, right? So we're depleting resources, and at the same time we're accumulating waste, right? We're accumulating landfills, litter in, like, for example, our oceans, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, right? All of these, there are all these unsustainable systems that we've set up for ourselves to live in because we weren't thinking about the long-term reach, the long-term effects of the systems that we were creating when we developed them, because we didn't have the foresight and the wherewithal to think about what was going to happen with something however many years down the line. We were thinking, oh, here we invented a car and it runs on, gasoline or whatever, not we weren't thinking about how big these things were going to get and how difficult it would be, to we've been like trying to switch to electric cars for like how many decades now, right? Like these things, the bigger they get and the more accustomed we get to the systems, then the more we depend on them and the more difficult it is to turn things around. And we're also seeing this in our economy, right? We're seeing the wealth go to a very specific, select, tiny group of people while there's all of these people who are starving, right? The biggest example is we can look at Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, who went and acquired Whole Foods and then immediately cut part-time employees' health benefits to save himself a couple million, something I think he makes in like a week or something like that, you know, and maybe even less. I don't remember exactly what it was, but basically like an amount he could sneeze at, and he's depriving people of health care, of their right to wellness, and um, and then at the same time, some of his employees for Amazon are collapsing of exhaustion on the warehouse floors, and they need to work and work to exhaustion just to feed their families. They're not making a living wage, right? So we have this sort of exponentialism where wealth is accumulating in these tiny places, and it's being, drawn away. The minimum wage hasn't gone up, although rents have gone up. Our cost of living has gone up, and our wages have not gone up, right? So we're having this this ever increasing gap, right? In the same way, right? Accumulating and depleting. And this happens in the level of our bodies as well. We have our bodies, and as we know from the research of Bessel van der Kolk and many other trauma researchers in the field, our bodies accumulate unprocessed trauma as sort of energetic waste, right? We acquire these imprints, we acquire downloads, we acquire programs that we learn from these moments of trauma or these moments of, whether it's a pattern that we're learning or energy that's getting stored in the body that is not being released, that creates a sense of hyperarousal or that puts our systems into so much shock then our systems actually cut off and desensitize, right? There's all these trauma responses that get stored in our bodies, and that's another place where we are depleting our resources, depleting our energy, right? And accumulating waste, accumulating trauma in our bodies. So the way we do one thing is the way that we do everything. And for us to create sustainability in the world around us, it's important that we do it for ourselves first. And yes, we can still have trauma, and we can still go to protests, and we can still vote, and we can still affect change in the world. But if we're really looking at long-term sustainable change, and this is the very global crisis that I'm speaking about, is really a shift in paradigm, right? It's a shift from what we think of as that open loop system, right? Where we accumulate waste, deplete our resources, right? Zero-sum game, only one person can win, to a paradigm of what Daniel Schmachtenberger terms omni-consideration, what David Hrostowski, the author of the Ascension Manual for Planet Earth, terms he calls it the second paradigm, essentially. We're in the first paradigm now, and we want to move to the second paradigm, right? Douglas Rushkoff, author of Team Human, talks about this too, right? Us returning, saying, exponentialism, right, is a virus, right? The only place we find exponentialism in nature is cancer, and cancer eventually kills its host if it's allowed to spread too much. So essentially, we're looking from moving from this paradigm of exponentialism, of virality, of accumulated waste and depleted resources. We're looking to move into a paradigm of sustainability, what Daniel Schmachtenberger thinks of as, gives an example of as a forest, right? A forest has no waste and no depletion in it if it's, it is its own ecosystem, right? It is its own sustainable ecosystem. So we're looking to create that on a grand scale. But in order to turn that ship around in the ocean, because again, we are so entrenched in these systems, we all need our own personal power and our own resources to be able to tap into our gifts and to apply those things. And one of the, without getting to like conspiracy theory or whatever, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious if you just look around and look at the way that our world functions. But one of the ways that our society as a superorganism has been able to oppress so many people is by keeping them in a state of trauma. I'm not saying that there are necessarily individuals who are like sitting around in some Illuminati meeting organizing this, although it's certainly in their best interests if you look at that. And there's been some weird things that have happened that really make you think and wonder. I'm speaking specifically, just a couple of years ago, there was the scandal of Elsa Gate on YouTube, right? Now YouTube makes sure that, if you have to mark specifically as a YouTube creator if you make content for kids, because they need to be able to look at that, because there was kids content on YouTube that was featuring like really extreme, traumatizing forms of abuse happening to like the Disney characters that they were, and no one knew where they were coming from, right? So whether there are people who are conspiring about this or not, there is some sort of a program running in the societal superorganism to keep people traumatized, essentially, to traumatize them so that they don't, because you can't very well take a free person who knows how to create for themselves and how to make abundance for themselves, and you can't keep them in a job like the Amazon warehouse for very long, because they're going to find a way to take care of themselves better, and that's, I'm not trying to throw any shade on people who are in those positions, because they're working extremely hard to feed their families, and they're and we owe it to those people to fight on their behalf, because this is what we're doing, right? We are making sure that there is unity in the collective, that this is sustainable, that everyone is taken care of. Because if we don't do that, then essentially what happens is, we're really looking at the survival of the species. We're really looking at, people joke all the time about a whole bunch of billionaires just going and colonizing Mars with Elon Musk, and everyone, like, look at the movie Elysium. You right? You remember that movie from a couple of years ago, Elysium, with Matt Damon? They all go to this, super luxury, wealthy. You have to have like however many $1 million to even apply to get in, colony on this planet Elysium, and everyone else is left back in, like, the the remnants of the apocalypse, right? Well, that's the doomsday timeline, right? And that's the doomsday timeline because even the people who think that their money is going to help them survive, if they don't have a planet to survive on, all the money in the world is not going to help them. We need actually all of us to create those sustainable systems together. So, even if it's not going to be good for the billionaires ultimately either. And I think that's what many people are trying to wake up all of society to seeing, right? We really need all of us in order to survive. So because otherwise, otherwise that yeah I don't see that being able to work, even for the people who do have money. Money can't buy you fresh water. Money, if there's none there. It's like if you're if it's Mad Max Fury Road, you're the billions in your bank account, which are essentially at that point just worthless numbers on a screen, aren't going to do much for you. So we're really looking at creating this sustainability in ourselves so that we can embody this vibration of happiness and peace and operating from the heart center, so we can do our part to turn these systems around. And we each have our own unique gifts. When we stop giving our energy away to places that are unsustainable, right, to the patterns that we took on and the programs that we took on that basically siphon our energy out to things that don't matter, or people who aren't giving us anything in return, or to jobs that are not creating any sense of satisfaction for us, or not just all of this energy leaking in ways that it's not coming back to us or not sustaining us. Once we get that back, then we can start doing our part to turn these unsustainable systems into sustainable systems. We can uncover our gifts, and we can figure out what it is we really need to do to be able to show up for our communities, and for us all to be able to take care of each other, and for us ultimately to be able to turn around those systems that we've put in place so that we can basically save our planet and our species as we know it. It's a big deal. And this phase, based on the work of some people that I've studied, for the larger global context of what it is that is happening here, and that I am contributing to in my own small way, in my container, by helping people get ready and find their gifts, and become sustainable systems in themselves, so that we can pass on this vibration, so that we can live in this happiness, right? So that we are less easy to control, or just numb out, or be miserable, and not do anything about about creating a world that we want to live in and that we can live in, that's going to sustain us. Essentially, sorry, that was a long sentence. I forgot where I was going with it, but that's the purpose of doing this work. That is the larger context of doing this work, and it's why I believe it's so important. And it's why I keep talking about this being an act of generosity, that taking care of ourselves and doing this work of repatterning, so that we can learn our human operating system, so that we can so that we can deal with whatever comes up, process our trauma in good time. Sometimes it might take a while, it's fine. We can titrate into it, but once we understand how it works, we can start to develop those sustainable habits. We can start to increase our bandwidth, and we can start to really take care of each other. And that's what we need, because, like they say, hurt people, right? And people who are walking around in trauma patterns are, even if they are caught in people-pleasing or fawn response patterns where it feels like they're being generous or they're being caring, if they're enabling harm to still happen to themselves too, then they're still complicit in harm. And then of course there are other traumatized people who are unconsciously creating harm. And there are also traumatized people who are consciously creating harm, right? So we really owe it to ourselves. But I want you to see that when you do this work for yourself, and when you choose to cultivate happiness for yourself and to set up sustainable systems and to engage in your community in a way that is healthy and empathic and productive and really helps us to bond together and to not be able to be controlled by forces outside us who, at the very least benefit from our kind of staying numbed out and just coming home and like watching TV and just, functioning as cogs in a larger toxic system. you know, that is the greater context of doing that work. That's the greater value of doing that work, and it's super important. So it's beyond just the level of the personal, and of course, the level of the personal is wonderful because you get to then be someone who's a happy person, right? You get to experience the joy of your own happiness, but you also get to share it with others. You get to be an example of what is possible, and as we continue to do this and anchor in this vibration stronger and stronger and stronger, we're going to influence more and more people along the way. And I know that that's something that I've intentioned for myself and something that I've been managed to create for myself, and I'm very grateful. I'm very thankful for the fact that I have been given an opportunity to be vulnerable and share, and that I've been given the gift of being able to explain and break down systems well enough that I can teach other people how to do this as well, and that the ripple effect goes forward. I feel extremely, extremely grateful and lucky, to be able to be in that position. I feel very fortunate to be able to do that kind of work, and the more we do that, the more we're going to help essentially what's going to ultimately amount to the survival of our planet, and making those leaps between our personal happiness and the survival of the planet is like, it takes a pretty wide range. Like, you have to you have to look at all the steps that are happening, but ultimately, if we are not operating out of greed and fear and hatred and scarcity, and I have to have all the money because whatever you have is something that I don't have, right? And if we move into that trust and abundance and community, that's ultimately the thing that's going to help our survival as a species. It's that greed that causes that exponentialism and that virality, right? That Agent Smith talks about in The Matrix, right? He says every other mammal on this planet establishes an equilibrium with its environment, but you humans do not. You multiply and multiply and you take over, and the only thing that resembles you like that is a virus, right? We want to stop that. We want to create sustainability. We want to create harmony with our environments, and that means our planet, and it means our societies, it means our social infrastructures, and the way that we're going to have the bandwidth and the energy and the sight to be able to turn those systems around is by doing that in ourselves first. That's the larger purpose of happiness. And yeah, it's great just to have to wake up and not be, I love waking up and not having like an anxiety attack first thing in the morning. That's wonderful. Oh my gosh, I get so much more done. I'm so much happier. That's great in itself. But I also feel, for me, a real sort of civic duty to keep going on this path. And not everyone's path is going to look like mine. People are going to do this in different ways, and that's totally cool. But whatever it looks like, it's whatever is in that alignment for you. It's whatever is the thing that feels good, that connects you to your heart, because that's what we got to do. If everyone was connected to their heart, then there would be plenty to go around, and people wouldn't be operating out of that fear that ultimately is going to contribute to the perishing of the planet if it gets to keep going. We got to turn around. We got to make sure that we become, that we do enough of this and pass enough of this vibration on that enough people are able to operate this way, and that's how we're going to survive. So that's why this work is really important to me. Thank you if you've been following this, if you've been doing it, if you've been implementing it in your own life, whether you're a client of mine or whether you just watch my videos, the important thing is that we're doing it. So thank you guys. and yeah, that's why happiness is so important. I'll see you next time.